The large ballroom of Atlanta's Grand Meridian Hotel buzzed with activity on that warm September evening. Jasmine Williams hadn't planned to attend the hospital's annual fundraising event, but her supervisor had insisted she represent the pediatric ward. Now, standing in her navy blue dress near the refreshment table, the 28-year-old nurse was glad she came. She watched the crowd, absently stirring her lemonade with a straw, after 12-hour shifts caring for sick children. These formal events always felt a bit overwhelming. Her colleague Sarah had abandoned her 20 minutes ago to chat with some doctors, leaving Jasmine to people watch on her own. That's when she first saw him. Marcus Thompson wheeled himself confidently through the crowd, wearing a crisp charcoal suit that complemented his wheelchair's sleek black frame. His warm brown eyes and bright smile caught her attention immediately. She noticed how people naturally gravitated toward him, his laughter carrying across the room as he chatted with various guests. "You look like you're having about as much fun as I am at these things," a voice suddenly said beside her. Jasmine turned to find Marcus had approached without her noticing. Up close, his smile was even more charming. "Is it that obvious?" Jasmine laughed, feeling her nervousness fade at his friendly expression. "I'm more comfortable in scrubs than fancy dresses." "I'm Marcus Thompson," he introduced himself, extending his hand. "I do software development for the hospital's new patient record system." "Jasmine Williams, pediatric nurse," she replied, shaking his hand. His grip was warm and firm. "So you're the one responsible for all those computer updates we've been dealing with?" Marcus raised his hands in mock surrender. "Guilty as charged, but I promise the new system will make your life easier once it's fully implemented." The conversation flowed naturally from there. Jasmine found herself drawn to his quick wit and the intelligent way he spoke about his work. When she mentioned a problem her department had been having with the old system, he pulled out his phone and made notes, genuinely interested in making improvements. "Most tech guys just tell us to turn it off and on again," she joked. "Well, I'm not most tech guys," Marcus responded with a wink that made her heart skip a beat. They talked for nearly an hour, barely noticing as the crowd thinned around them. Marcus shared stories about growing up in Boston, his move to Atlanta 5 years ago, and his passion for developing healthcare software. He briefly mentioned the car accident that had left him paralyzed from the waist down, but didn't dwell on it. Instead, he made Jasmine laugh with tales of his first disastrous attempts at cooking in his wheelchair. Jasmine found herself sharing things too, about her close-knit family in Atlanta, her journey to becoming a nurse, and the children she cared for at the hospital. She appreciated how Marcus listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that showed he was genuinely interested in her work. As the event wound down, Marcus seemed to gather his courage. "I know this great coffee shop near the hospital," he said. "They make these amazing blueberry muffins. Maybe we could grab coffee sometime?" Jasmine felt warmth spread through her chest. "I'd like that," she replied, trying to keep her voice casual despite her excitement. They exchanged phone numbers, and Marcus added, "Fair warning. The shop is in an old building with a bit of a steep ramp at the entrance, but I've mastered it without tipping over. Usually." His ability to joke about his disability with such ease made Jasmine smile. "Well, I'm a nurse. If you do tip over, at least you'll be in good hands." Their laughter echoed in the now quiet ballroom. As they said their goodbyes, Jasmine felt something she hadn't expected when she'd reluctantly gotten dressed for this event hours earlier. Hope. Hope for something new, something real. Walking to her car later, she couldn't stop smiling. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Is tomorrow too soon for those muffins?" Jasmine looked at the message for a long moment, her heart light. She typed back, "Tomorrow is perfect." What had started as a routine fundraising event had turned into something neither of them expected. Sometimes, love arrives in the most unexpected packages, wrapped in charcoal suits and warm smiles, ready to wheel its way into your heart when you least expect it. 3 months into their relationship, Jasmine sat in her mother's kitchen, watching her stir a pot of Sunday dinner while trying to stay calm during what had become a regular conversation. "Baby, I'm just worried about you," Mrs. Williams said, adding more seasoning to her famous collard greens. "Taking care of a disabled man for the rest of your life? That's a big responsibility. You're young, beautiful, you could have anybody." Jasmine took a deep breath, counting to 5 in her head. "Mama, I'm not taking care of Marcus. He's completely independent. He drives himself, works a high-paying job, and even cooks better than I do. But what about children? Have you thought about that? Her mother pressed on. Marcus's injury doesn't affect his ability to have kids. Jasmine explained for what felt like the 100th time. And yes, we talked about it. Across town, Marcus was facing his own challenges. He sat in his modern apartment, video chatting with his best friend Tony. "Man, you know I support you," Tony said through the screen, "but are you ready for all the stares? People already look at you differently because of the chair. Now add in being an interracial couple." Marcus adjusted his laptop screen. "We already get stares, Tony, but you should see how Jasmine handles it. Last week, some old lady kept gawking at us in the restaurant. Jasmine just smiled and asked if she wanted to take a picture to make it last longer." Both men laughed, but Tony's face grew serious. "What about your parents? They still giving you the cold shoulder?" Marcus ran a hand over his face. His parents' reaction to seeing pictures of him and Jasmine on social media had been disappointing but not surprising. They'd always imagined him with someone who matched their upper-middle-class Boston background. "Dad's coming around slowly. Mom, she'll need more time, but I'm not letting their prejudices affect what Jasmine and I have." Later that evening, Jasmine and Marcus met at their favorite spot in Piedmont Park. The early evening air was cool, and they found a quiet bench overlooking the lake. Jasmine noticed how Marcus had gotten more confident in transferring from his wheelchair to regular seating, though he never complained when she offered help. "Rough day?" he asked, noticing her quieter than usual mood. "Just the usual, Mama being Mama." Jasmine leaned her head on his shoulder. "She thinks I'm signing up for a lifetime of being your nurse." Marcus tensed slightly. It was his biggest fear, that Jasmine would eventually see him as a burden rather than a partner. "Maybe she's right to worry," he said softly. "There are things I'll never be able to do. Simple things, like dancing with you at a wedding, or running after our kids in the backyard." Jasmine lifted her head and turned to face him. "Stop that right now, Marcus Thompson. You know what I see when I look at you? I see the man who drove 2 hours last week to get me soup when I was sick. The man who makes me laugh even after my worst days at the hospital. The man who's teaching himself to bake because I mentioned loving my grandmother's cookies." Tears welled up in Marcus's eyes, but he blinked them away. "But the future?" "The future is ours to figure out together," Jasmine interrupted. "And for the record, I've seen videos of wheelchair dancing. It's beautiful, and I expect you to learn it for our wedding." Marcus laughed, pulling her closer. "Our wedding, huh? Getting ahead of yourself there, Williams." "Just putting it out in the universe," she said with a grin. As they sat watching the sunset, a young boy passing by pointed at Marcus's wheelchair. His mother tried to shush him, looking embarrassed, but Marcus waved them over. "You want to know why I use this?" he asked the boy kindly. When the child nodded, Marcus gave him a simplified version of his accident story, then showed him some wheelchair tricks that made the kid laugh in delight. Jasmine watched the interaction, her heart swelling. This was the man she was falling in love with, someone who turned awkward moments into opportunities for connection, who faced every challenge with grace and humor. Later, as they said goodbye in the parking lot, Marcus grabbed her hand. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For seeing me, just me. Not the chair, not the disability, just Marcus." Jasmine squeezed his hand. "Always." In that moment, both knew that whatever barriers the world put in their path, they would face them together. Sometimes love doesn't just break down barriers, it proves they were never really there in the first place. The Atlanta Botanical Gardens looked magical in the early evening light. Marcus had spent weeks planning this moment, making sure every detail was perfect. He checked his jacket pocket for the 10th time. The ring was still there, safely tucked away in its velvet box. Sarah, Jasmine's colleague from the hospital, had helped him set everything up. She'd convinced Jasmine to take an evening shift swap, ensuring she'd be free tonight. What Jasmine didn't know was that she was walking into a carefully planned surprise. "Marcus, why are we getting so dressed up for a regular date?" Jasmine asked as they moved along the garden path. She looked beautiful in a yellow sundress, her braids decorated with small golden clips that caught the setting sun. "Can't a man treat his girlfriend to a nice evening?" Marcus replied, trying to keep his voice steady. His hands were slightly shaking on his wheelchair's controls, but Jasmine didn't seem to notice. They reached the rose garden where Marcus and Sarah had spent that morning setting up. Tiny white lights twinkled in the bushes, and rose petals made a path to the central gazebo. A small table waited there, set for two with champagne already chilling. Jasmine gasped. "What is all this?" "Just a little something special," Marcus said, his heart pounding. "This is where we had our first real date, remember?" "Of course I remember." Jasmine smiled. "You nearly ran over my foot trying to impress me with your wheelchair steering skills." Marcus laughed, remembering how nervous he'd been that day. "In my defense, these paths are tricky to navigate." They reached the table, and Marcus gestured for Jasmine to sit. A waiter appeared. Another part of Marcus's plan, and served them appetizers. They talked and laughed, reminiscing about their past year together. "You know," Marcus said, reaching for Jasmine's hand across the table, "that first date changed my life. Before I met you, I convinced myself that love wasn't in the cards for me anymore. After the accident, I thought no one would want to deal with all of this." Jasmine squeezed his hand. "Their loss is my gain." "Let me finish," Marcus said softly. "You never once made me feel like I was broken or less than whole. You see past the chair, past everything that could have been barriers. You make me laugh when I'm down, push me when I need pushing, and love me exactly as I am." He reached into his pocket with slightly trembling hands and pulled out the ring box. Jasmine's eyes widened. "I had this whole speech planned," Marcus continued, his voice thick with emotion. "But seeing you here, looking so beautiful in the place where our story really began, all I can say is that I love you, Jasmine Williams. You make every day better just by being in it." Tears were streaming down Jasmine's face now. Marcus moved his wheelchair closer to her and opened the ring box, revealing a beautiful diamond ring with small sapphires on either side, her favorite stone. "Will you marry me?" Before Jasmine could answer, they heard a small commotion. Both turned to see their families emerging from behind the garden's trees. Jasmine's parents, her two sisters, Marcus's parents who had flown in from Boston, and his younger brother. "I wanted them all here," Marcus explained quickly, "because this isn't just about us joining together. It's about our families becoming one." Jasmine was crying too hard to speak. She nodded vigorously, then found her voice. "Yes, yes, of course I'll marry you." Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger with slightly shaking hands. Their families burst into applause and cheers. Even Marcus's mother, who had been the most resistant to their relationship, was wiping away tears. Jasmine leaned down and kissed Marcus deeply, not caring who was watching. When they broke apart, she whispered, "You planned all this?" "With a lot of help," he admitted. "Sarah's been my partner in crime for weeks." Their families surrounded them with hugs and congratulations. Mrs. Williams, who had once been so concerned about her daughter's choice, held Marcus's face in her hands. "Welcome to the family, son," she said softly. Under the twinkling lights of the garden where their love story began, Marcus and Jasmine started a new chapter. Sometimes the most beautiful proposals don't require getting down on one knee. They just need two hearts perfectly in sync, ready to face whatever life brings together. 6 months before their big day, Jasmine and Marcus sat in their fifth wedding venue of the week. The venue coordinator's smile looked strained as she pointed out various features of the elegant ballroom. "And of course, we have a lovely bridal suite upstairs." She paused, glancing uncomfortably at Marcus's wheelchair. "Though I suppose access might be challenging." Jasmine felt Marcus's hand tighten around hers. Before either could respond, the coordinator quickly added, "We could possibly set up something downstairs. In the storage area, maybe?" "I think we've seen enough," Jasmine said firmly, standing up. "Our wedding venue needs to celebrate our love, not hide anyone away in storage rooms." Outside in the parking lot, Marcus let out a frustrated sigh. "Maybe we should just do a courthouse wedding." "No way," Jasmine replied, pulling out her planning notebook. "We're going to have our dream wedding. We just need to find people who understand that dream includes everyone being comfortable." The next day, they visited the Garden View Hotel. The wedding coordinator, a woman named Lisa, greeted them with genuine warmth. She immediately started pointing out the venue's accessibility features without making them feel like an inconvenience. "We've hosted several weddings where accessibility was a priority," Lisa explained, showing them the elegant ramps that blended seamlessly with the decor. Our getting ready suites are both on the main level, and we have a wheelchair-accessible dance floor. Marcus and Jasmine shared a look. Finally, someone who got it. But wedding planning brought other challenges too. During a family dinner, Marcus's mother Barbara brought up their wedding colors. I just think navy and silver would be more traditional, Barbara said, eyeing the bright yellow and purple color swatches on the table. More Boston society appropriate, you mean? Marcus's younger brother Kevin muttered. Those are our colors, Mom, Marcus said firmly. Yellow for the sunflowers Jasmine loves, and purple because it's her favorite color. Jasmine's mother Joyce jumped in, trying to help. Barbara, why don't you tell us about the rehearsal dinner venue you found? The one with that beautiful garden? The tension eased slightly as Barbara brightened, pulling out photos on her phone. Over the past months, she'd been making real efforts to embrace their relationship, even if she sometimes slipped back into old habits. Later that week, during their cake tasting appointment, the baker kept directing all questions to Jasmine, as if Marcus wasn't there. And what does the bride think about the lemon filling? Why don't you ask the groom? Jasmine suggested pointedly. He's the one who bakes. The baker flushed, finally turning to Marcus. Soon, they were deep in conversation about different buttercream techniques, and Marcus's eyes lit up as he described his vision for their wedding cake. See? Jasmine whispered later as they left the bakery. Sometimes people just need a little reminder to see past their own assumptions. One evening, while reviewing their guest list, Marcus grew quiet. What's wrong? Jasmine asked, noticing his expression. I just realized, our first dance. I want to do something special, not just wheel around in circles. Jasmine pulled up her tablet. Already on it. There's a dance instructor who specializes in wheelchair partner dancing. I found her last week. Marcus stared at her in amazement. You think of everything, don't you? No, she smiled. I just think about you. About us. The next few months flew by in a whirl of decisions and preparations. They found their perfect venue, chose flowers that would line wheelchair-friendly aisles, and designed a reception layout that would let everyone move freely. One Sunday, as they finalized the seating chart at their favorite coffee shop, an elderly couple stopped by their table. We couldn't help but notice you're planning a wedding, the woman said kindly. You two have such a beautiful glow about you. Thank you, Jasmine replied, squeezing Marcus's shoulder. After they left, Marcus looked at Jasmine with tears in his eyes. That's the first time someone's commented on our wedding planning without mentioning the wheelchair. Because they saw what really matters, Jasmine said softly. They saw love. Planning a wedding was never simple, but planning one that challenged people's preconceptions while staying true to themselves, that took extra strength. Fortunately, strength was something Jasmine and Marcus had in abundance, especially together. The morning of October 15th arrived with perfect fall weather. Sunlight streamed through the windows of the Garden View Hotel's bridal suite, where Jasmine sat surrounded by her sisters, mother, and bridesmaids. Her wedding dress, an elegant ivory gown specially designed to look beautiful whether she was standing or sitting beside Marcus's wheelchair, hung nearby. Girl, stop fidgeting. You're going to mess up these edges. Her sister Tanya scolded playfully while working on Jasmine's braids, weaving tiny pearls and golden threads through them. I can't help it. Jasmine laughed nervously. I just want to know how Marcus is doing. In the groom's suite down the hall, Marcus was getting ready with his brother Kevin's help. His custom-tailored suit was designed for comfort in his wheelchair while maintaining a sharp, sophisticated look. You know, Kevin said, helping Marcus with his bow tie, I've never seen you this happy before, not even before the accident. Marcus smiled at his reflection. That's because I've never been this happy before. A knock at the door revealed Marcus's father, Thomas, looking emotional in his own formal wear. The relationship between father and son had improved greatly over the past year, especially after Thomas saw how genuinely happy Marcus was with Jasmine. Your mother wanted me to give you this, Thomas said, holding out a small box. Inside was his grandfather's gold pocket watch, a family heirloom. Dad. Marcus's voice cracked with emotion. You're still my son, Thomas said quietly. And Jasmine, she's the daughter we didn't know we needed. Meanwhile, Marcus's mother Barbara had slipped into the bridal suite. She carried a small velvet box. Jasmine, dear, Barbara said, her her usual formal tone softened with emotion. This belonged to Marcus's grandmother. She opened the box to reveal a delicate sapphire bracelet. She would have loved to see you wear it today. Tears welled up in Jasmine's eyes as Barbara fastened the bracelet around her wrist. It was more than just jewelry. It was acceptance, finally, into the Thompson family. The ceremony space looked magical. Sunflowers and purple flowers lined the aisle, which had been specially widened and smoothed for Marcus's wheelchair. The guests filled the seats, a beautiful blend of both families and friends from all walks of life. Marcus waited at the altar, his heart pounding. When the music started and the doors opened, he felt his breath catch. Jasmine appeared, walking with her father, looking radiant in her dress with her braids crowned with flowers and gold. As she walked down the aisle, Marcus could see some guests wiping away tears. His physiotherapist, who had become a close friend, gave him a thumbs up from his seat. Even the venue coordinator, Lisa, was dabbing at her eyes in the back. Jasmine's father kissed her cheek before placing her hand in Marcus's. The elderly minister smiled warmly at the couple before beginning the ceremony. "Love," he began, his voice carrying across the room, "knows no boundaries. It doesn't see differences as barriers but as beautiful, unique pieces that make each relationship special." During their vows, both Marcus and Jasmine had to pause several times to wipe away tears. When Marcus spoke about how Jasmine had shown him that life had no limitations when you're with the right person, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. One of the most touching moments came during Jasmine's grandmother's reading. The 85-year-old woman stood proudly, speaking about love's power to break down walls and change hearts. "When my granddaughter first told me about Marcus," she said, her voice strong and clear, "I worried, like many of us did, but then I saw them together. I saw how he looks at her like she hung the moon, and how she lights up when he enters a room. That's when I understood. Love isn't about what a person can or cannot do. It's about how they make your heart feel." As Marcus and Jasmine exchanged rings, their hands trembled with emotion. The minister's words, "I now pronounce you husband and wife," were met with thunderous applause. Their first kiss as a married couple was sweet and tender, filled with promise. As they turned to face their guests, Jasmine sitting gracefully on Marcus's lap in his wheelchair, they saw not judgment or pity, but pure joy and celebration. In that moment, they weren't a black woman and a disabled man who had overcome obstacles to be together. They were simply Marcus and Jasmine Thompson, two people deeply in love, beginning their journey together. The hotel's grand ballroom sparkled with golden lights and purple and yellow decorations. Guests moved excitedly to their seats while Marcus and Jasmine waited outside the double doors for their grand entrance. The wheelchair-accessible stage at the front of the room held the live band, who were adjusting their instruments. "Ready, Mrs. Thompson?" Marcus asked, squeezing Jasmine's hand. "More than ready, Mr. Thompson," she replied, carefully arranging her dress as she sat on his lap. The DJ's voice boomed through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome for the first time Mr. and Mrs. Marcus and Jasmine Thompson." As they entered, Marcus smoothly guided his wheelchair in a perfect spin, making Jasmine laugh with delight. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Their entrance song, "At Last" by Etta James, filled the room as they made their way to the head table. Marcus's brother Kevin, serving as the MC, took the microphone. If you knew Marcus before he met Jasmine, you hardly recognize him now. Back then, he rarely smiled. Now, he's the happiest person in any room, except when Jasmine's there, because nobody can outshine her joy. Jasmine's sister Tanya went next. "When Jasmine told me she was dating someone new, I'll admit I had questions. But the first time I saw them together, those questions disappeared. Sometimes love doesn't need explanations. It just needs a chance to grow." During dinner, Marcus and Jasmine moved from table to table, greeting their guests. At the family table, Marcus's mother Barbara was deep in conversation with Jasmine's aunts about their shared love of gardening. Their fathers discussed sports, looking more relaxed than either couple had ever seen them. "Look at that," Jasmine whispered to Marcus. "Who would thought?" A surprise came when Marcus's physiotherapist, Dr. Chen, approached their table with his wife. "I have something for you both," he said mysteriously, handing Marcus an envelope. "But don't open it until later. The couple's closest friends have planned special performances." Sarah, Jasmine's colleague from the hospital, sang a beautiful rendition of "Stand By Me." choosing the song deliberately for its message of unwavering support. Marcus's tech team had created a touching video montage of their journey together, including clips from their first date at the botanical gardens. One particularly moving moment came when Marcus's grandmother Rose took the microphone. At 90 years old, she commanded the room's attention with her presence. "When I was young," she began, "people said love had rules. They said it had boundaries. But looking at my grandson and his beautiful bride, I see that real love breaks every rule ever written. Marcus and Jasmine, you taught this old woman that love is love, pure and simple." The dinner service impressed everyone, especially the cake that Marcus had helped design. Each tier featured intricate purple and yellow sugar flowers, and the cake topper was a custom piece showing the couple in a dancing pose. "Did you ever imagine our wedding would be like this?" Jasmine asked Marcus as they watched their guests enjoying the celebration. "Better," he replied. "It's better than anything I could have imagined." The dance floor started filling up as the band played popular hits. Marcus and Jasmine had practiced for months with their dance instructor for what was coming next, but only a few people knew about their surprise. Kevin returned to the microphone with a grin. And now, the moment everyone's been waiting for, the couple's first dance. The band began playing "Can't Help Falling in Love," but with a special slower arrangement they had practiced. Marcus and Jasmine moved to the center of the dance floor, where they had practiced their wheelchair dance routine countless times. What happened next left their guests amazed. Marcus guided his wheelchair in smooth, graceful movements while Jasmine moved with him in perfect harmony. They had transformed traditional partner dancing into something uniquely their own. When Marcus spun Jasmine while she balanced perfectly on the wheelchair's arm, the crowd gasped and then burst into applause. But this was just the beginning of the evening's surprises. As they finished their dance, Marcus caught Dr. Chen's eye across the room. The doctor gave him a subtle nod, and Marcus felt his heart race with anticipation. The biggest surprise of the night was still to come, one that would leave everyone, especially Jasmine, completely speechless. As the first dance ended, Marcus whispered something to Kevin, who quickly got everyone's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain in your seats. Marcus has a special surprise for his bride." Jasmine looked at her new husband with curiosity. Marcus wheeled them to the center of the dance floor, then asked for Dr. Chen to join them. The room fell silent with anticipation. "Jasmine," Marcus began, his voice shaking slightly with emotion, "for the past 8 months, I've been keeping a secret from you." He paused, seeing confusion flash across her face. "Every morning when I said I was going to physical therapy, I was actually going to a special medical program with Dr. Chen." Dr. Chen stepped forward, holding what looked like 2 sleek, black mechanical braces. "Marcus has been part of an experimental treatment program," he explained to the stunned crowd. "Using these new robotic assistance devices, he's been learning to stand and take steps again." Gasps filled the room. Jasmine's hands flew to her mouth, tears already forming in her eyes. "Marcus, what are you saying?" "I wanted to give you something special today," Marcus said, his eyes locked with hers. "I wanted to share our first dance in a way I never thought would be possible again." Dr. Chen and Kevin helped attach the braces to Marcus's legs. They were thin and barely visible under his pants, designed to provide support and stability while responding to his muscle movements. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Jasmine stood trembling as Marcus gripped the handles Dr. Chen provided. With intense concentration and determination on his face, Marcus began to push himself up from his wheelchair. The mechanical braces whirred softly as they assisted his movement. Slowly, steadily, Marcus rose to his feet. Jasmine burst into tears. Their mothers were sobbing openly. Even Marcus's father had to wipe his eyes repeatedly. The entire room seemed to be holding its breath. "I may never walk normally again," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion as he stood supported by the braces. "But thanks to this new technology and months of secret practice, I can stand with you, dance with you, and take steps with you." The band began playing at last again, this time even slower. Dr. Chen and Kevin stayed nearby as Marcus took his first careful step toward Jasmine. The braces made a soft mechanical sound with each movement, but Marcus had practiced this moment hundreds of times. When he reached her, Marcus took Jasmine's hands in his. Together, they began to sway gently to the music. It wasn't the kind of dancing most people were used to seeing. It was slower, more deliberate, and somehow more beautiful because of the effort and love behind every movement. I can't believe you did all this, Jasmine whispered through her tears. How did you keep this secret? It wasn't easy, Marcus smiled, especially on the days when the training was hard, but I wanted this moment to be perfect. They moved together in a small circle, Marcus taking tiny steps while Jasmine matched his pace. The crowd watched in awe as the couple shared this incredible moment. Sarah, recording everything on her phone, was crying so hard she could barely keep the camera steady. The program is still experimental, Marcus explained softly as they danced. I can only stand for short periods, and I'll still use my wheelchair most of the time. But now we have options we never had before. Jasmine touched his face gently. You didn't have to do this for me. I love you exactly as you are. I know, Marcus replied, his eyes shining. That's exactly why I wanted to do it. Because you loved me without expecting me to change, you gave me the courage to try. As the song came to an end, the room erupted in thunderous applause and cheers. There wasn't a dry eye in the house. Marcus carefully lowered himself back into his wheelchair, exhausted but beaming with joy. Jasmine's grandmother summed up what everyone was thinking when she declared loudly, "Now that's what I call love in action." The celebration continued with renewed energy, but that moment, when love and determination came together to create something magical, would be forever etched in everyone's memories. It wasn't just about standing or taking steps. It was about showing that with love, support, and dedication, nothing is impossible. Hashtag. The wedding reception continued late into the night, filled with joy, laughter, and more than a few happy tears. After Marcus's incredible surprise, the atmosphere in the room had transformed into something magical. Every guest felt like they were part of something extraordinary. As the evening wound down, Marcus and Jasmine found a quiet moment together near the terrace doors. The late October breeze carried the scent of autumn leaves, and the fairy lights twinkled overhead. I still can't believe you kept this secret for 8 months, Jasmine said, gently rubbing Marcus's shoulders. She knew standing earlier had taken a lot out of him, though he hadn't stopped smiling since. There were so many times I almost told you, Marcus admitted. Especially on the hard days when nothing seemed to work. But Dr. Chen kept reminding me how amazing the surprise would be. Sarah approached them with her phone. You guys have to see this, she said excitedly, showing them the video she'd captured of the moment Marcus stood up. The look of pure shock and love on Jasmine's face made them both tear up again. Send that to everyone, Marcus's mother Barbara called out, joining them. She looked at Jasmine with warm eyes. You know, when Marcus first told us about the experimental program, I was scared. I didn't want him to be disappointed if it didn't work. But you've taught our family something important about hope. Jasmine's mother Joyce appeared with plates of wedding cake. And you, she said, pointing her fork at Marcus, have taught us about determination. I was wrong to worry about my daughter marrying you. You're exactly what she needs. The two mothers shared a knowing look. All their previous concerns seemed so foolish now. Later, during the last dance of the night, Marcus and Jasmine swayed together, with Jasmine perched comfortably on his lap in the wheelchair. They watched their families on the dance floor. Marcus's brother Kevin was dancing with Jasmine's sister Tanya. Their fathers were talking animatedly about future family barbecues, and their mothers were already planning Sunday dinners together. Look what we did, Jasmine whispered. We didn't just join two people, we joined two families who thought they had nothing in common. And this is just the beginning, Marcus replied. Dr. Chen says with more practice, I might be able to stand for longer periods. Maybe even walk short distances someday. But only if you want to, Jasmine said firmly. I meant what I said earlier, I love you exactly as you are. Marcus squeezed her hand. I know. That's what makes me want to try even harder. Not because I have to, but because I can. As the last song ended, their guests lined up for the send-off. Instead of traditional rice or flower petals, everyone held small paper lanterns that glowed with battery-operated lights. Marcus's idea to make sure the wheelchair wouldn't slip on scattered petals. Before they left, Dr. Chen pulled them aside one last time. I have more news, he said with a smile. The success of Marcus's progress has helped secure funding for the entire program. More people will have access to this technology now. See? Jasmine beamed at Marcus. Our love story is already helping others. They made their way through the tunnel of lights, their guests cheering and calling out good wishes. When they reached their decorated car, specially adapted for Marcus's driving needs, they turned for one final wave. The light from hundreds of small lanterns illuminated their faces as they looked at the gathering of people who had witnessed their journey. There were tears and laughter, hugs and waves, and so much love it seemed to make the very air glow. "Ready for our next adventure, Mrs. Thompson?" Marcus asked as they settled into the car. "With you?" "Always, Mr. Thompson," Jasmine replied, leaning over to kiss him. As they drove away toward their honeymoon and their new life together, the paper lanterns behind them looked like stars fallen to earth. It was a perfect ending to their wedding day, but more importantly, it was a perfect beginning to their life together. A life that would continue to prove that love knows no boundaries, that family can be built across any divide, and that the greatest surprises come from believing in the power of love and determination. Sometimes the most beautiful love stories aren't about overcoming limitations. They're about realizing that true love has no limitations at all.